add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often, if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
This is hiring.
Hiring on all cylinders.
Oh yeah, Rob Stevenson back here once more for Hiring on All Cylinders from the Intello booth at ERE Recruiting Conference in San Diego, and I am joined now by Nate Ollestad, who is the Director of Recruitment at Duo Security. Nate, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So
good to be here.
We were actually a minute ago talking about the responsibility of the talent team, and I had to halt you and be like, hold on, let's get this recorded. Let's not get carried away. But you were talking about how you have a sales recruiter who takes it personally when a candidate who she produced and gets hired falls off after 6 months. And
Exactly.
is that fair for a recruiter to take that personally, you think?
No, I don't think so. Like for me, like there's so many factors that go to whether a candidate leaves on their own or is not performing well and
Right.
leaves. So it really comes down to like, one, is the hire regrettable or not? Or is the exit regrettable or not? And two, was that person given everything that they needed, right? So we're in a hyper-growth company. And a big part of like our hiring profile that we offer is to have people who are like, who can come in and kind of figure things out sometimes, right? Because everybody's running a million miles a minute.
Right.
And so when it comes to like evaluating whether a candidate has been given the tools that they need, like you're not there with them every day. I tried to tell her, I was like, don't beat yourself up over if we have a turnover or have somebody attrit within the first 3 to 6 months. She really thinks that it's her fault, and she takes personal accountability for it, which I love because I want my recruiters to take accountability and ownership in the process, right? Yeah. But really, there's so many other things, like were they given coaching, guidance, leadership that they needed? Were they set up for success coming in? Were they given the right territory? Are they working on the right products? Are they whatever, right? So no, I think from a retention strategy standpoint, and like the onus falls on the business. Like the business has to take ownership of developing that talent when they're in. Yeah. Now we can be kind of a career coach for that candidate through the process, and a lot of times my recruiters have built such good relationships with candidates that they are a confidant to them moving forward. They come back to us and ask like, what should I do now? Like what kind of roles, like in a year or in 6 months when I hit my year mark, like what do you think I should be doing, right? So we kind of are those advisors to them.
Yeah.
But we are not the person there day to day, giving them, managing their performance and
giving them the best chance to succeed, right?
Yeah.
But I can see why she'd beat herself up. One, she cares, and two, it's like, well, did I misrepresent this role? Did I misrepresent the team? Was this not what they signed up for?
She absolutely does not. I've heard her, I hear her on the phone often, and she does a very good job at like portraying kind of what these roles are, what the expectations are. And, again, we're hyper growth, and the roles kind of morph over time.
Yeah.
Like what we needed in these sales roles the first, 2-3 years is not necessarily what we need in these sales roles now. As we hit the pedal.
Right. So I agree with you that it's not her fault. Although, if you're seeing candidates churn out, that's all right. Now I have to hire for that rec again, right? And back to square one. So will the talent team take responsibility for coaching their business partners and hiring teams, and in terms of developing talent and making sure that they do have the best chance to succeed?
So, yes and no, right? Again, my recruiters are advisors to the business, right? They're consultants. When they see things that are working, they applaud the team. When they see things that aren't working, though, I encourage them to speak up and let them know, give them feedback.
Yeah.
But we have a really good business partner, our people business partner team, that is there. Like they're like a big part of their job is to work with leaders and build out strategy for how they're going to develop their group, their team. We also have a learning and development manager that we recently hired in, because this was an important part of our scale, is giving the tools to our managers to be more effective leaders. So, I mean, we're growing fast. We're building this highly functioning people team, and recruiting is one part of it. But they're not their sole responsibility when I go and evaluate them, mid-year, end of year, is not to be like, well, did you do, talent development with your leadership team?
Right,
like
right,
yeah. We have experts in those areas on our team that provide that service to them.
But recruiters recruit.
Let recruiters recruit.
Yep.
That's my thing, right?
So when you do that evaluation, are there specific metrics you're looking at, like output, productivity? How do you sort of benchmark your recruiters?
So we actually don't have performance reviews annually. It's a decision that we made. We more do things on the fly and like one-on-ones and in real time. But I mean, if we're talking about evaluating recruiters, the activity and the output of execution. Like I'm 100% performance-based manager. If you have figured out how to do run your desk and get the outcome that we need, then I let them do it how they want to do it. I provide suggestions on different ways to tweak things up, but I want to know that when we have like the activity levels are there, if they're not hitting their hiring goals,
right.
Feedback from hiring managers and feedback from candidates are big for me, because it shows that's a real-time indicator of the quality of the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
On a quick note on that, I had another one of my recruiters. I received an email from a candidate the other day who proactively went out of their way to find my contact information,
right,
to reach out to me and tell me like what an impact that one of my recruiters had on his life.
How about that?
He ended up turning us down too.
Jeez.
But he went out of his way to say, in no way, shape, or form was it an indication of her. She's the best recruiter I've ever worked with. She was a confidant. She was there for me, and when I had some issues going on in my personal life, and like I just couldn't he had to go out of his way to tell me.
Yeah.
I was like speechless.
Yeah.
Right?
That's an amazing story.
Yeah, it was one of the best emails I probably ever had received for a recruiter on my team, and it's those things that you can't quantify.
Yes.
But that. Yeah, it just shows the pride and the passion of the work that my team does.
That's why they do it, right?
That's why they do it, right? It's to impact people's lives. And she impacted him in more than just a career.
Yeah.
Right? Like she impacted his personal life. So those are the things. And when I evaluate, I look at things like that, right? From more of like a qualitative standpoint.
Okay, gotcha. So in that case, that's sort of an extreme case of candidate feedback, an amazing one. But in other cases, do you solicit that feedback? Do you like talk to candidates, or are there like post interview surveys you conduct? How do you sort of take that temperature?
So I'm in the process of determining whether we do like an NPS type survey. I want to this is important for me to get feedback from candidates, whether it's NPS or 4 or 5 question survey. The ATS that we use has a pre-canned questionnaire.
Okay.
It has 9 questions in it, though, so I'm curious about the actual engagement.
It seems like a lot.
Yeah, it seems like a lot, right? Because NPS is supposed to be quick. Like, would you work with this person again? Would you hire this person again?
Yeah,
and then like a text box to give a little bit of context.
Right.
But so I'm very much looking to implement that. I know like that's an important metric for me to be able to benchmark against, because not only like. If you look at recruiters on the corporate side, a lot of times, like we were talking about this before, it's like we're a cost center, we're kind of a support center, we're often looked at it that way.
Yeah.
But how do you, and like it's outside of hires and cost per hire, like how do you quantify like the quality of what a recruiter's doing? And how do you tell the story of recruiting back to the business? And when you have like an NPS or some way that you can actually benchmark against other people in the industry, like that's just one more piece of data that allows us to like benchmark candidate experience,
right?
Which is one of the most important parts to me in the in the interview process, regardless of outcome.
Yeah. So in the case of conducting like, as you said, like an NPS like report on candidate experience, is there like an inherent bias in that? Because if you you're not just gonna like immediately go and flame this potential employer, right? And be like, oh yeah, really interested in the role, but that process really sucked. Like 4.
So it's confidential.
Okay.
So going into it, that takes the bias out of it. I think knowing that you can freely speak your mind. It's just like a Glassdoor review.
Right.
Like people are gonna go, and they may do it in the heat of the moment, and maybe go back and take it down later. But you want to hit, like the idea is you want to hit them so you can get real quality feedback from them in real time. And it's mostly like you don't do it for everyone you talk to. You do it kind of when they get through the interview process and they've been dispositioned, whether they've gotten the job or they did not, turned us down or didn't get the job.
All right, so not when they're actually in process.
Yeah, because you want to get somebody who's been through the whole process and can fully evaluate it rather than like went through an initial phone screen, right?
Okay. So you mentioned that the stock ATS one is 9 questions. That sounds long. If it was up to you, what would be the key things you'd want to know?
I want to know response times. Like, was the candidate responsive? How engaging was the interview team? Because a lot of the interview process, like in feedback that I've received in NPS in previous lives at my last company, a lot like recruiters that would get dinged on their NPS score, but the feedback trended towards the hiring manager and the team having a poor experience with them.
Gotcha.
Right? So I'd want to know about that. I want to know if they would recommend our company to somebody else. Like, so did they enjoy themselves? Did they have a pleasant experience with the interview process? Would they recommend? Like,
gotcha. Okay, so in that second point, the idea was that recruiters, their opinion of recruiters suffers even though it was a poor interview that the recruiter wasn't involved in. Okay.
And that's one of the things that it's hard to sometimes get the point across to the business that you're partnering with, is that your actions are a reflection of us all.
Right.
My recruiters' actions are a reflection of the business, right? If we have a poor candidate experience, like a recruiter has a poor response time, doesn't get back to a candidate, they go into a black hole.
Yep.
They feel like, all right, this company sucks.
Yeah.
But really, it may just be that recruiter that
missed an email by 4 days or whatever.
Missed an email or whatever. But the whole point of these surveys is try to get actual qualitative and quantitative information. The quantitative is the feedback score, or is the score 1 to 10, right?
Right.
Gives you that NPS score. The qualitative is give us some context of why, because from that you can now pull trends. Now, if I can go back and pull the trends for the last 2 quarters of the last year, say, all right, we had an NPS score of 52, which is really good. Anything above, I think 45 is a really good NPS score. But if I now pull the data and show of all of our scores that were from 0 to 6, the trends of the feedback were more rely on the business. Now that gives me another data point and another way that I can go and consult back to my business.
Right.
Saying, here's the experience that our candidates are going through, and it gives us coaching. Rather, actually, I'd rather give that information to my recruiters to have them go back and coach their business, because they're the ones building the relationship with them.
Yes.
Right?
And having the intake meetings and doing the debriefs and all
having
that.
The debriefs, absolutely. And then real time through the process, right? Hey, I just received, 3 NPS feedbacks from the last 3 people that interviewed, because they're tied to a role. So you can, so you just don't know the name. I mean, you can infer, take a guess, right? But the whole point is to be confidential, but it's tied to a role, so you know what role. So now you have more data to make trends off of, right? And now they can go back, the last 3 candidates that interviewed, or the last 5 candidates that interviewed over the last month or so, their feedback was interviewers were late to the interview. They left early. They asked the same question. They didn't feel valued. They had my resume up in front of them in the interview process, and you can tell didn't do any prep work. And so those are all things that you can go back and coach the business,
right,
and have them provide a better interview experience.
And also things that the talent team might not notice was happening because they're not babysitting the interview process. They're not watching them through the glass of the door as it's going on, right? They kind of would make sure the person's
always,
in the room. Yeah.
Not always, yeah. But yeah, it's just a good way for us to have more benchmark information and data to help consult back to the business. Again, quantifying a little bit more of our value back to the business.
Right. And designating here's where the bottleneck is. So hey, why aren't we hiring? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here's the experience. Here's where people are falling off. Here's where people are having the bad time.
Yep. Absolutely.
Cool. Do we want to cover your panel at all? Your panel appearance?
Sure.
Do you know what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so.
Just gonna kind of wing it. I mean, this seemed
no.
we winged this. It went okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So our panel is about
As he looks at the agenda.
no. So our panel is based off the ERE survey that's sent out to leaders.
Okay.
Surveys, ask questions like, what keeps you up at night as a leader? Like, what have you done to develop your recruiters as talent advisors? How would you rate your business?
What keeps you up at night, Nate?
Oh,
Keep it related to the talent team though.
not hiring fast enough.
Okay.
Right? Like that's always I think if you talk to any talent leader, right? It's like, how do we hire quicker? How do we hire quality quicker?
Okay.
Process stuff, right? Like, do I have the right process? Are we doing the right processes to optimize our recruiting workflow? Tools, right? Like, am I using the right tools? Have I given my recruiters the right tools to be successful? I get 50, 60 emails a week from different vendors wanting to sell me stuff.
Guilty.
Yeah. Not Intello.
Probably. They're probably somewhere in your spam folder. Yeah.
I saw your Salesforce
Oh yeah.
last night, so I know all the outreaches. But it's finding a way to like evaluate the right tools that we need. It's because it's like death by tools right now in the recruiting world. But one of the things, like on that note, like the things that keep me up about that is, do they have the right ones? Am I evaluated is my need to not want to spend every single day talking to vendors like damaging my team by not getting them the right tools?
Yeah.
Because it's like there's a dime a dozen like automation platforms for like scheduling tools.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
There's a bunch of tools that allow you to like sourcing and screening, finding candidate information online.
I mean, there's 30 in this room, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And then, I think telling the accurate story to the business too, right? Is another thing that keeps me up at night. It's like, we work so hard. Like, recruiting is looked at as like, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
You're only as good as your last hire.
Yep.
And I had a conversation with one of my hiring managers once that said, hey, I popped into the ATS to see what the pipeline was. I had a recruiter that was tending to a family situation outside of work, and he's like, I popped in just wanted to see what the pipeline was like, and I didn't see anything there. Well, our ATS is less of a CRM; it's more of an ATS,
Right.
and so I'm like, well, you run salespeople, like you lead salespeople, and you're used to using Salesforce, and you can go in and see every single outbound outreach to every candidate at any point in time,
every touch with every account,
regardless if they've ever responded. I'm like,
Yep.
my team, like right now, we're using LinkedIn Recruiter, and so that's our CRM for lack of better terms. Like that's our ability to like manage our passive pipeline of candidates until we engage them, then we
they go
put
in
them
the ATS,
then they go in the ATS, right?
Right.
So he was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the business automatically assumes like if I send you 3 candidates, like you've only talked to 3 people, like I only have 3 people in front of me. It's like, no, I've screened through 75 candidates.
Right. I filtered out the ones who I was afraid might throw up on themselves when they came into the interview.
Exactly. I reviewed through 75 resumes or outreaches. I talked to 25 people, narrowed it down to 10, and from that 10, I gave you the top 3.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that took 2 weeks of work to do.
Right.
And so that's about telling the story back to the business, right?
Yes.
Like what we're doing, and that just because we didn't make the hire today doesn't mean that we weren't doing the work.
Right. We run into that problem a little bit too, is because we only send a candidate to like the VP of sales or our CEO or like whoever the like final like ultimate decision maker is, once that we're all sure like this is someone we want to be hired, right? So then their feedback is usually like, yeah, they were great, but I can't really benchmark it because I've only talked to this 1 or 2 people. It's like, yeah, because everyone else we didn't put in front of you.
So
right?
I have an opinion on that. Leaders should know what good looks like.
Yeah.
They've been doing that. They've been for most of them, right? Been hiring for a long time.
Right.
And they've been building teams. Now, newer leaders, I understand wanting to see a spread of people just because, especially if it's their first or second hire, they want to make sure they get it done right.
Yeah.
But leaders that have been around for a long time know what good luck look like. So when they ask, like, all right, I interviewed Joe. He was awesome. Loved him. All right, cool. We're we going to talk about putting an offer together? Well, I want to see 2 or 3 other people to benchmark against him. It's like, okay, like,
was he good or not? Like,
like that's mutually exclusive. Like,
right.
Did you like him? Does he fit your qualifications? Does he fall in line with a compensation standpoint? Blah blah blah. Right. And if good recruiters can kind of help push back on that, because at the end of the day, we can give them 2 more people to interview,
right,
to make sure that they like that person. But we have to sometimes help make that decision for a business, right?
Yeah, like you could do that. You could give them, here's 2 more candidates so you can benchmark, right? But really, we just want you to like feel like you're benchmarking. But those are 2 other human beings you're putting into that process. Like
exactly.
Before you bring in those people as
and we
like,
wouldn't, and that's more like a hypothetical, right? Like we wouldn't bring 2 people in that we knew weren't qualified,
yeah,
right? But it's the point of like what good looks like, and if we happen to hit it on that first candidate, great, pull the trigger, done. That's off your plate. Moving on, right? But it's just, I think it's human nature to want to evaluate. Like, put it this way: if you were going to look for a car, and the very first car that you hopped into, you were like, "Man, I love this car."
Yeah.
Would you pull the trigger, or would you be like, "Well, I probably owe it to myself to go drive a couple more cars,
right?
Just to make sure that I'm buying the right car and I'm not missing out on that." Like,
On the other hand, like, no, I wouldn't, because I've never bought cars, right? On the other hand, if you had been a car dealer and you had bought cars your last 20 years of your career, like, you would know as soon as you got in that car that like that was good, right?
Exactly, right? You've been driving good cars. Like, I like Audis.
Yeah.
My next car will be an Audi. And regardless of what model it is, I know that, hey, I'm going to go drive. I may drive 2 models, may drive the S Series, may drive the A Series, just to see the difference.
Yep.
And to tease myself and put myself through hell. All right? But I know that I want one of those too, and I know that that's good to me. Right? That satisfies my needs of what I'm looking for in that automobile.
I love it.
Yeah.
So things that keep you up at night are arming your team with the best tools, filling roles quickly and not losing them to other offers, and A Series versus S Series Audis.
Yes. That's a good thing that keeps me up at night, though,
right, yeah.
Right?
You toss and turn with a huge smile on your face. Nate, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for joining me. I had a blast chatting with you.
Thank you.